What's going on, everyone? Today we got some clips from the Michael Knowles show, and Mr. Knowles decides once again to speak on a topic that he really has no business speaking on because he lacks the statistical and also the anecdotal experience to actually intelligently speak on this topic. So let's get into it.
I think the answer to where the political alignment goes that is shocking, that has cachet, that wins people over, that is a broad movement, it doesn't have the narrowness of, the very online right or the campus intifada or, these kind of tiny things, is another major topic of political debate these days in the commentariat, and that is the trads. Trad life, trad wives, that tradition, the trads versus the radicals. I think that is getting closer to where the real political divide is right now. Because what does it even mean to be trad?
The trads versus the rads. You really missed a great opportunity there, Michael. And before we listen to Mr. Knowles' word salad and lack of an explanation, really, let's actually do some of our own research and let's look up the definition of traditional. Definition number 1, of relating to or in accord with tradition. Number 2, of pertaining to tradition, derived from tradition, communicated from ancestors to descendants by word only, transmitted, blah, blah, blah. 3, observant of tradition. So it seems we need to look up the definition of the root word tradition to really understand what traditional means. Let's look that up. All right, tradition number 1, the passing down of elements of a culture from generation to generation, especially by oral communication. Number 2, a mode of thought or behavior followed by a people consistent or continuously from generation to generation, a custom or usage. Number 3, a set of such customs and usages viewed as a coherent body of precedents influencing the present. Synonym, heritage. So that is the dictionary-defined definition for the word tradition and traditional, so that now we can have a better understanding of what, people mean when they say traditional wife or traditional life or traditional husband. It is pertaining to the traditions of a specific area, culture, country, family, whatever it be. It's basically, you do things the way that we have always done things because that's the way that we've always done things because it works better that way, because when we break from tradition, it works not as good. But now that we have our dictionary definition of traditional, let's get into Mr. Knowles' idea of it.
Does it mean, you go around LARPing? Does it mean that you adopt some anachronistic costume or political? No, I think to be trad there are all sorts of implications. There are implications that are anthropological. You think that men and women are different rather than the same, and rather than thinking men can be an anthropological aspect of being a traditional person. I guess a generational aspect of it would be that you have children. You're not closed off to the possibility of life. A financial aspect of it might be that you save your money. You're not profiting. You don't just spend your money on total nonsense. A liturgical aspect of it might be that you go to church, first of all, and that you go to churches that are more traditional, that have more liturgy to it, that have a little more smells and bells. But the reason I think this plays politically, it has nothing to do with any of that, which is maybe interesting for the commentators and academics and people who are nerds. But the reason it plays politically is because what it pretty much all boils down to, this trad life, is just being normal. Just being a normal person.
Well, if it has nothing to do with it, then why did you spend so long talking about it? Why did you draw that giant circle around the point that you were trying to make to then end up back at the starting point where we began from to then go directly to the point that you were trying to make? What was the entire purpose of beating around the bush like that, metaphorically speaking, just going in a giant circle around your point before actually getting to the point? That's why I played that at 3 times speed, because it had nothing to do with anything else he was talking about, and he said so. But you could see Mr. Knowles here is now trying to equate traditional with quote unquote normal. So now that he's making this comparison, I think we should also do some research and look up the definition of normal. All right, normal. Number one, conforming with, adhering to, or constituting a norm, standard, pattern, level, or type. Two, functioning or occurring in a natural way, lacking observable abnormalities or deficiencies. Three, relating to or designating the normality of a solution. Although I think we really need to go a level deeper to truly understand what the word normal means, and let's go to the root of the word norm. It is a noun, number one, a pattern that is regarded as typical of something. Two, a standard or expectation that is established or given enterprise or effort. Three, a pattern of behavior considered acceptable or proper by a social group. And that, I think, definition number three is really the definition that we're looking for here as to describe really what it is exactly that we're talking about when we talk about tradition, or, what is normal traditional values, in the sense of it's a pattern of behavior considered acceptable or proper by a social group, i.e., the social group that you are in determines what behaviors are considered traditional, and whatever behaviors are basically prevalent throughout that social group are also thus considered normal. At least that's how I think it's working in Mr. Knowles' head right there. But the problem with equating traditionalism with normality is that what is normal in a social group may not actually be traditional, because you can have a social group that is completely normal, in the sense of like every single individual in the group is normal in the sense of they're all the same as the other ones in the group. But this social group that we're speaking of could be the exact opposite of traditional, and that's why it's really bad to use the word normal to describe is typically described as traditional values, is because what's normal for one person and what's normal for another person might not be the same, and probably isn't. Not only that, almost anything can become normal if enough members of a social group adopt that type of behavior. So with these definitions in mind, and this understanding of how Mr. Knowles is viewing the problem in mind as well, let's continue on, shall we?
And not chopping yourself up and dyeing your hair all sorts of crazy colors and shrieking at your dad and living in a communist polycule and, choosing not to have children and all the stuff that modern people do that's really weird and disordered. It's kind of just being normal. And being normal is really attractive and it's really great. I'll just speak from personal experience here.
I think you've spoken quite enough from personal experience, Mr. Knowles, and we need to get back to the reality of the situation here, because you are straying further and further from it the longer we listen to you. So let's just imagine that all the things that he said right there, that he's saying are not quote unquote normal behaviors, while they might not be normal for, what would be considered quote unquote normal people in our society, they could be very well considered normal behaviors for certain social groups of people in accordance with the definition of the word norm. And if those, okay, to end the confusion here, I'm going to call traditional values traditional, and I'm going to call, whatever is the normalcy standard, just normal, okay? That way, because the way Mr. Knowles is trying to equate normality with traditional is just not correct at all, as I've already explained. So we're just going to keep those two ideas separate for the sake of my sanity. But say, for example, there is a social group of people where it became normal in that social group to have these behaviors that Mr. Knowles explained right here that are very not traditional. They're very opposite of traditional. And that's why it's bad to use this type of analogy that Mr. Knowles is using, is because it's confusing, first of all, and second of all, it's not correct in describing what's actually going on here, because it could be very well normal for someone to be LGBTQ. Like, imagine if you're just a kid growing up with two dads and they do a gender flip-flop, I don't know, 2 or 3 years old or something, and like you're never going to have a chance to actually know what's normal. You're going to think that these very non-traditional non-normal behaviors are actually normal because that's all you've been exposed to is people behaving in the same types of way that you're behaving. So when you get outside of your social group, you're going to realize that you don't fit in at all. But later on in the episode, Mr. Knowles decided to read an article written by a previously famous conservative commentator or whatever. I don't know exactly what she was, but Lauren Southern wrote an article about her marriage or her divorce. I'm not entirely sure. I don't remember exactly because I didn't care enough to pay that much attention to what exactly it was she was describing, because I was paying more attention to the other things that she was saying that everyone else was just kind of not paying attention to for some reason. But anyways, let's get into that part and beat ourselves over the head with this blockhead, Mr. Michael Knowles. Onward and upward.
Some people are not content with the rise of trad life. They don't like it. One of whom is my friend, Lauren Southern. Lauren Southern just has this really interesting interview, this exchange in Unheard, written by Mary Harrington. And it's about how she tried the trad life and it didn't really work for her. It's worth reading.
Pro tip. No, it's not worth reading. I read it. It's absolutely not worth the read. You'll actually get all the information that you could ever possibly want from this article from these short clips that I'm about to show right here, so there's no need to read it and to lose your sanity like I did. I did it for you. But I mean, if you really want to read it that bad, go right ahead. Feel free to, kill off whatever remaining brain cells you have. Be my guest. But you can't say I didn't warn you.
Here's just a little snippet. Lauren talks about how she got married within 4 months of knowing a guy at the age of 22.
Yikes. 4 months? She got married within 4 months of meeting this guy? Are you insane? Are you crazy? Are you cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs? That is not a good idea. Married after 4 months. That's not even enough time to get to know each other. How many dates did they go on in those 4 months before they were married? Let's be real here. Okay, all right, let's pretend they they went on a date every Friday and Saturday night, and let's just say they hung out Sunday night, okay? So there's about 4 weekends in every single month, so that's 3 times 4, so that's 12 hangouts or 12 days of hanging out with each other per month, multiplied by 4. So that's 48 days that they could have spent together. And plus, of course, obviously after work, they likely hung out with each other as well. But if we're just going to estimate a rough estimate of number of days spent, together before getting married, it's about 48 days. At least that's just, the amount of time on the weekends they could have spent together. That's assuming they spent all of the weekend hanging out with each other. I mean, Jesus Christ, guys, that's insane. Married after 4 months. My God. And then they wonder why the marriage didn't work out. I wonder. Such a mystery.
She writes, there were warning signs from early on. If I ever disagreed with him in any capacity, he'd just disappear for days at a time. I remember there were nights where he'd call me worthless and pathetic, then get in his car and leave, which is obviously awful, awful stuff. What kind of man speaks to a woman that way?
Oh, this is just awful, awful stuff. What kind of man speaks to a woman that way? I don't know. Maybe the kind of man who is dealing with a witch of a woman. Maybe. I don't know. He doesn't even think to ask the question, why did he say that? What happened before the man said those things or did those things? No. We don't need to even think about that or ask those questions. Just believe all women. Repeat it with me. Believe all women. All right. Now that we have that understanding down, now the next understanding we need to have is all men are evil. Repeat it with me. All men are evil. All right. Now that we believe all women and we know all men are evil, we can clearly see how this situation played out. She did nothing wrong. She did absolutely everything correct. She was a total angel in this situation, and this big bad evil man is just being mean to her because he's a big bad evil man. Yep. That's exactly what's happening here, guys. No reason to doubt Mr. Knowles' interpretation of this article. we need to bring up the topic of the video, traditionalism, or traditional wife, or traditional life, or whatever you want to call it. Doesn't matter, okay? But traditionally speaking, and I can say this with confidence because this is also stated in the Bible as well. So, you know, if you want to get specific, this is Christian tradition right here. The wife is supposed to submit to the husband. Right. Okay. So if she is, quote unquote, and I'm using her words here, disagreeing with her husband, is she being a traditional woman? No, she is not. Because what does a traditional woman do in accordance with the traditions of the Bible? She submits to her husband's authority. Not only that, the fact that this guy was like, he would leave, like maybe it was because she was being so annoying that he just couldn't be in the same house as her without, being driven literally insane by her constant nagging over things they disagreed on that she should be submitting to his authority on. We don't even think to ask those questions because that is absolutely not what's happening here, guys. Remember what Mr. Knowles said. He is just an awful, awful human. And, like who on earth would possibly ever treat a woman as horribly as this man did? Because there's no way she did anything wrong, as I just explained. Because, like that, just put on the blinders, guys, and believe all women and repeat with me, men are evil. Men are evil. Men are evil. All right. Hopefully I've appeased the YouTube censors now so they lighten up on the shadow ban. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, YouTube censors. I know you're listening.
But she didn't see them, thanks to the simplified anti-feminist ideology she'd absorbed and promoted. Lauren says, I had this delusional view of relationships that only women could be the ones that make or break them and men can do no wrong.
Yeah, and if she actually believed that, then she is a giant fool because, come on, men can do no wrong. That statement is just as dumb as saying women can do no wrong, okay? Like, you are just the literal inverse of a feminist, and not like, inverse meaning like traditional. You're the opposite of a feminist, meaning you're just a conservative feminist, okay? Because many of the women that I dated played themselves off as being traditional until we ended up in a relationship together. And then I realized that they were just giant raging feminists who use Christianity as a cover to control men. And they were not actually traditional in any sense whatsoever, even though they expected me to treat them traditionally, even though they refused to act as a traditional woman. And I'm like, well, I'm going to treat you as you act. So, don't be surprised when you get treated like the 304 that you are. Not only that, I'm glad that she also admits that her views on this were oversimplified because they totally are. Like you can't like that those ideas that she described there are just not traditional in any sense whatsoever.
So she didn't spot the red flags, even as they became more extreme. He'd lock me out of the house. I remember having to knock on the neighbor's door on rainy nights because he'd get upset and drive off without unlocking the house. It was very strange to go from being this public figure on stage with people clapping to the girl crying, knocking on someone's door with no home to get into, being abandoned with a baby.
Hold up. Wait a minute now. You're telling me a man dropped you off at y'all's house with his child in your arms, and he didn't unlock the door and drove off. And you expect me to believe that she had absolutely nothing to do with why he did that. We're just gonna gloss right over that, Mr. Knowles, are we? Because all right. I feel like it's pretty easy and safe to say that most people can agree that women are typically more emotional and men are typically more logical. So if a man is doing such irrational, unlogical things as leaving his wife and child locked out of their house and then leaving them abandoned in the neighborhood, that man is acting very emotionally and not very logically. Now, what makes men act emotionally? Well, it's usually when other people, specifically the ones close to them, are acting also highly emotionally as well. Because if you expect me to believe that a man just practically abandoned his wife and child in their neighborhood, locked out of their house for no good reason at all, then you are insulting my intelligence because I am not stupid. Okay? She did something. She did something. No man abandons his wife and child like that, even if it's only for a few hours. No man does that without a damn good reason, okay? Like, that's his child. That is his own blood. It's like people forget that, like, men do not want to give up their own children. It is literally a biological, natural urge in us to protect our children, okay? Like, but if a man is out here abandoning his child, then something has driven him to the point of insanity, and that is likely a woman, because there are very few things in this life that can drive a man to the point where he will abandon his own child, but a woman is one of them. And the fact that she's out here, spreading this all around the internet, all this drama, just makes me even more suspicious about the fact that she's actually the cause of all the issues in this marriage. And this poor guy is just stuck with her. But anyways, we got quite a bit more left. Let's move on.
But as she tells it, the nightmare began in earnest when he was offered a work opportunity in his home country of Australia a few weeks after the birth of their baby. She did not want to leave her support networks behind, but he used the political and religious importance she placed on lifelong marriage as a lever to force her to agree.
Notice the words that she's using to describe what's happening in that situation. She's saying that because her husband wanted to keep the family together, because, he got employment in Australia, his home country, he wanted to keep the family together. Everyone stays living all under one roof. She called that as using a lever against her. See, this is what's making me think that this woman is not the angel she's making herself out to be, because if keeping your family together is a tool of manipulation in your perspective, then you are not a traditional person. Not only are you not traditional, you are not a good person, okay? Because once you have children, all else falls to the side. Like, at least in my opinion, like, literally nothing is more important than your own children once you have them. Like, everything else comes second, okay? And you guys notice the excuse that she used to not keep her family together is, well, I have support groups here. Well, that's nice, sweetheart, but let's look at this picture realistically and logically here, all right? So if your husband decides to turn down his opportunity of employment in Australia, so that you can keep your stupid support groups here, let's see. Family goes broke. Yeah, how are you going to raise kids with a hubby with no job? But, I'm sorry, you have your support groups. Everything will be taken care of through your support groups, of course. Yeah. Totally makes logical sense right there. Like, you could see that this woman obviously does not only does she not submit to her husband's authority, she also does not trust his judgment either. Because he's literally out there, like, trying to better himself, get better job opportunities, and move up in the corporate chain so that he can better, provide for his family and, make sure they have all their needs taken care of. And what is her concern? Her concern is, well, I'd have to get a new support group. Wah. Like, I'm sorry, like, you can't get a new support group in Australia? Like, women's support groups don't exist in Australia? Are you insane, lady?
Whenever I wouldn't do something, he would say, I'm going to divorce you. So feeling she had no other option, she assented.
Okay, that last clip right there, that was a doozy right there. Yes, it was. All right, so we need to put that last comment into perspective. All right, let's go word by word. So basically, what happened, at least my interpretation of what happened, is she would disagree with her husband to the point where he literally would say, I'm going to divorce you if you can't agree with me on this. And then she would say, oh, well, I guess I have no option, and then just kind of go along with it. But it's just like, there never should have been an argument in the first place, because we need to really put that comment into perspective, okay? Divorce is not the same for a man and a woman, okay? A woman walks away from a divorce 90% of the time with the children, 90% of the time with child support. She also walks away. She can walk away with alimony if she's lucky. That'll be paid to her for the rest of her life. And she can walk away with the house and half of his money and half of his income. So, for a woman, there is a massive cash payout and possibly a house, as well as her children, on the other side of a divorce. What's on the other side of a divorce for a man? Oh, that's right. Nothing but misery and lots of money that gets taken out of your pocket by the government. Because when a man goes through a divorce, he loses his children, he loses his house, more than likely. He loses half of his income, he loses half of all of his money, and half of all of his stuff. So, if a man has been put in the position where he is literally willing to cut his entire life in half, everything he's ever worked for in his entire life in half, to just walk away from a woman, one has to ask the question, what on earth did she do to make him willing to pay that much money just to walk away from her? Because if you do not ask that question, you are insane, okay? I am not stupid. Do not insult my intelligence. I could see what's happening here. I know the type of woman that this woman is. I've read her other articles as well. Like, this is not a traditional woman in any sense whatsoever. What I take away from that last clip is that she would literally argue with her husband over stupid things that did not need to be argued like that over. And she would literally argue with him to the point where he was literally willing to split all of his money and stuff in half just so he didn't have to argue about it anymore. Like, that's how annoying this woman was to her husband. He was literally willing to pay half of everything he ever made in his entire life just to not have to argue with her some more. That's bad, guys. That's really bad, because if a man is willing to pay that much money to just not, like, imagine how much he put up with just to get to that point.
Okay, so that's not it, right? That's not the kind of thing that we want. One feels very bad for Lauren. We haven't heard this guy's side of the story, but he's not around, so I guess that kind of proves her side of the story.
I'm sorry, what the F did you just say there, Mr. Knowles? Oh, because he's not here. That just proves her side of the story. Oh, yeah, buddy. Like, I'm sorry, Mr. Knowles. Can you pull the effing crayons out of your GD brain so that you can think for half a freaking second, man? Jesus Christ, I never knew you could be so stupid, man, and be so intelligent at the same time. Like, my God. Like, not only that, I think this also kind of shows, like, just the blatant sexism that is prevalent or quote-unquote normal in our society here, that even supposed quote-unquote traditional people or, self-proclaimed traditional people such as Mr. Knowles here believe in such non-traditional values. Like, this very sexist perception that men are always bad and in the wrong, and women are always innocent and correct. And I mean, it's just blatant sexism, as you can see it break down. We saw how almost this exact same situation broke down with the Steven Crowder divorce and the Daily Wire. I made a whole video going over some of the Steven Crowder court documents that got released, and you can just see how absolutely horrible of a person Steven's wife Hillary is. That woman deserves to burn in HE double hockey sticks, if you know what I mean. Because that, like, go and look at some of the things that she did to Mr. Crowder, and you'll feel bad for the man, because, like, no man should have to go through that. But this is the exact same type of pattern of behavior that I see happening, that I saw happen with Mr. Crowder, that I see happening with Mr. Knowles interpreting Miss Southern's article here. And, we have court documented evidence to prove that they were wrong about Steven Crowder, so they can't argue that point. But, ladies and gentlemen, if you just go and read enough of the articles by this woman, Lauren Southern, you'll very quickly realize that Mr. Knowles is being very naive here. And not just naive, I would say it's naivety to the point of negligence, in fact. That his complete disregard for the truth, just... Like he doesn't ask any questions why he did the things that he did, what she possibly did to contribute to the situation, or what she possibly did to try and, resolve the conflict without it bubbling up into this giant argument in the relationship. But I mean, so far all she's done is highlight how she's refused to submit to her husband unless her husband has literally pulled the card of, all right, if you won't submit to me, then I'm leaving to go find a woman who will, because this is not how a marriage works. Okay? The wife submits to the husband's authority. That's because there is a natural order to the universe. Okay? It goes God, man, woman, child, animal. All right? This is the moral order of reality. All right. You can try and fight it all you want. You could tell me I'm wrong all you want. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change a thing. Okay. The truth is the truth. But if we are to assume traditional biblical marriage values, as Mr. Knowles is pretending like he is espousing here, then he should very quickly recognize that Miss Southern is very obviously, just admitting in front of everyone, calling herself out, basically saying that she is not a traditional woman or housewife, because she was very obviously not submitting to her husband, so much so to the point where he abandoned her and he even threatened to divorce her multiple times, it sounds like. So yeah, we really do need to hear the man's side of the story here, because, there's two sides to every coin. There's two sides to every story, and I'd be willing to bet if we heard the man's side of the story, it would drastically contradict a lot of the things Lauren Southern says. But that's the difference between men and women. Women go out and just gossip to do reputation damage. Meanwhile, men just kind of keep their mouth shut and move on.
This ain't it. Nobody wants this. And this is being presented as the dark side of trad life. The title of the essays, Lauren Southern, How My Trad Life Turned Toxic. But it isn't trad, right? I mean, even to say, whenever I would say I don't want to do something, he would say, I'm going to divorce you. And that was the religious, aspect of marriage. No, in our culture, at least, in the West, a culture that used to be called Christendom, divorce was not permitted. It's certainly not a traditional aspect of our culture. I mean, we had, the Henry VIII basically rent his kingdom asunder because he wanted to get a divorce. He ripped Christendom, in half. That's very radical to do. He says, I'll divorce you, or, he'd leave, go away for days at a time. I mean, that's.
Well, congratulations on Mr. Knowles for recognizing that this marriage, or that this lifestyle that these two people were living, was absolutely not traditional in any sense whatsoever. However, he gets the diagnosis completely inverted to the actual truth of the situation, because yes, while I agree, divorce shouldn't exist, Mr. Knowles. I agree. I don't believe in divorce either. However, we shouldn't have divorce, but you know what we also shouldn't have? We also shouldn't have wives that refuse to submit to their husbands unless they literally say that they're going to divorce them. She kind of painted herself into this corner here. And then along comes Mr. Knowles with a ladder to lift her right out of that corner and pretend like she didn't just paint herself right into that corner. And then to turn around and blame everything on the husband because, of course, as you guys remember, we already established earlier in the video, man evil, woman good, believe all women, all men are liars. So with that level of understanding, we can very clearly understand why Mr. Knowles believes the things that he believes.
So then you got to be a little bit more specific. I mean, probably the weirdos at the university campuses wearing the keffiyehs calling for, a Palestinian state or something, they might appeal to tradition. Hamas, in a way, appeals to a kind of tradition, but it's not our tradition. It's not so. Even that, maybe the most shocking part of the trad life is you can't distill it down into an essay on Substack. You can't distill it down into a tweet thread. You can't write a book about it. I mean, you can write a book about it, but that won't encapsulate everything.
Watch out, everyone. I'm about to contradict Mr. Knowles right here, okay? I'm apparently, I can't do this, but I'm about to do what I can't do. I'm going to break a world record here, everyone. Is everyone watching? Is everyone recording? Did somebody call the Guinness Book of World Records? Because I'm about to do something. All right. So in my opinion, and this is just my opinion and my perception of traditional and what being trad means, is that being traditional means valuing your family above all else. It means no matter what happens in life, you put the safety and the concerns and the prosperity of the family above all else. You do not value yourself above the family. You are below the family. You serve the family. And the only possible thing that could possibly ever come above the family, that could ever take precedence above the family, is God. God is the only thing that can be valued above family. So, there, in just a few short sentences, I distilled down into what my opinion or my perception of what being traditional actually means, because there's lots of different interpretations of it, as Mr. Knowles was like to point out. But uh, when we're just simplifying the situation and being kind of honest about it here, this is it, here in America. There's a very well defined set of traditions, specifically Judeo-Christian traditions here in America. So when we say traditional here in America, it can basically be assumed that we pretty much mean what is traditionally Christian, which, if we're going to go with tradition, then we need to bust out the old book and dust it off and take a good look through that, because that's actually tradition.
One of the great, more traditionalist political philosophers who did write a book on this subject, Michael Oakeshott, points this out in Rationalism and Politics, that an exaltation of tradition is kind of an anti-ideology. You don't write it in 3 bullet points on the back of a napkin. There's some things you learn from book learning. There's some things you learn just by doing them, and so you got to put it into your whole body, and it's particular to your place. The tradition in Djibouti looks different than tradition in America. So what is our tradition? And then even deeper, because America's a young country, what tradition is that based on? And then, I guess, the Anglo tradition. What tradition is that based on? It goes back to the animating spirit of our culture, which is Christianity, which did not spring up 300 or 400 years ago. It sprung up 2,000 years ago when our Lord walked the earth and instituted a visible church with secular history redeemed in it and visible successors. And how does that express itself in different particular places? It's about real people. I mean, even the fact Lauren writes here that she married some foreigner. Well, yeah, then it's hard. It's hard to live the trad life when you're married to a foreign person who then takes you to a foreign country and largely a foreign tradition.
All right. I get the point that he's trying to make there, but I'm half Australian, okay? I lived in Australia till I was 5, and then I lived the rest of my life here in America. So I could tell you from personal experience, Mr. Knowles, the traditions in Australia are not very different from the traditions here in America when we compare them with the other traditions that we can find around the globe. I mean, let's just compare it. We're both descendants of the British Empire. We were both at one point parts of the British Empire. We both speak English. We both have a majority Christian population. A majority of the people in both of the countries are descendants from Europeans. So most people in Australia and most people in America are white, etc., etc. The similarities continue quite a bit on. While yes, there are minute differences in some of the select few traditions, for the most part, I would say a traditional man and a traditional woman and a traditional marriage and a traditional life are universals, really, rather than dependent so much so on the culture, because this is, again, why I had an issue with Mr. Knowles comparing traditional with normal, because normal does not necessarily mean traditional. It can mean traditional sometimes, but other times it doesn't. Just depends on the social group you're talking about. But this is really why it's more so just important to marry someone who has the same religious beliefs as you, because typically people with the same religious beliefs will typically have the same traditions, or at least similar enough traditions. They'll be able to get along and possibly create a functional family. Either way, the fact still stands that No matter what culture you immerse yourself into, if you found someone that believes in the same like traditional type of beliefs as you, then it really doesn't matter where you live or what types of people you surround yourself with. As long as you stay true to your beliefs, then it's not that difficult to stay traditional. Like you just have to not change your quote unquote traditional beliefs. Once again, Australia and America are not very different. While obviously we have two very different accents of English. I mean, that's really the biggest difference between us. And well, I guess the fact that we have guns and they don't. Sorry, guys. I'd ship you over some guns if I could, but I'm not willing to go to jail for that. So my best advice is buy a 3D printer and learn to 3D print because you can 3D print your own guns now, and they're just as good as the ones you can buy. So you might as well just 3D print them and save yourself a couple $100.
And no knock on Lauren. I mean, I really feel for all the stuff she went through, but it's just a reminder. I think this is why this view of politics in life is really catching on now, at least among young people. Why it's attractive to a lot of people, because it's shocking. It's like Norm Macdonald going up at the Bob Saget roast and doing old Dean Martin jokes. It's totally different from the current left-right divide or Republican-Democrat or communist-capitalist or whatever people. It's different and it's attractive, and ultimately I think it's more durable.
Copium, and more copium. That last part is just nothing but pure copium on Mr. Knowles' part. I mean, sure, Mr. Knowles, maybe in your specific church they just got a recent influx of like younger people or whatever, but let's be real here, okay? Society-wide here in America, young people are not getting back into church. Young people are not becoming more traditional. Hey guys, it's Future Red Rocket here, and I just wanted to add some statistical evidence to back up my anecdotal evidence because I realized that my previous video also had some statistical evidence that kind of proves my point. So as you can see in the graph here, this is just an American study done in America, and so the dashed red line is the death rate, the dashed blue line is the birth rate, and the yellow line is the percentage of population change. And this is from 2001 to 2021. And if people were becoming more traditional and having more children, as Mr. Knowles said, then shouldn't this not be happening? Granted, I understand that this data is 3 years old now, but if the current trends that this graph shows continued, then the birth rate and the death rate were going to intersect each other and pass. So that would mean that the percent change in the population would go negative. So we might very well already be there and we just don't know it yet, but I don't know. I don't think that these types of trends just reverse overnight like Mr. Knowles is hoping that they do, which is why I label his thoughts here as total and complete copium. Cope harder, Mr. Knowles, because if you cope hard enough, maybe, just maybe, it will be true in your dreams when you sleep at night, because that's how cope works. It doesn't work in real life. Hey guys, it's Future Red Rocket here with more statistical data, so let's break this down too. So this graph I'm showing here is a graph of the number of gonorrhea diagnoses in the course of a year in London, England. Now I understand this is a study from London, but this was done by the UK Parliament, and this was done specifically in London, but I feel like this data could be extrapolated out to most other major cities because, most major cities are they're very similar. They're very liberal, if you know what I mean. But anyways, on the graph here, you can see these are they have 2013 to 2022, and they've broken it down by age group. But more importantly here is the general trend of all of the age groups. You'll notice that there's a nice big spike in 2019, and then it drops off really hard in 2020. probably because of the lockdowns and everything. But then it picks back up in 2021, and by 2022, we've hit all new highs. And basically, according to the data of this study, approximately 1 in every 5 people in London gets diagnosed with an STD every single year. That is what the current level was at the end of the study in 2022. So if younger people were having less in and out action going, if you know what I'm talking about, then we should see these rates of STDs going down, not up. So yeah, here is more evidence so that Mr. Knowles can cope even harder. Well, yes, like some of these things are going viral. This is not like you like am I the only one who goes onto Twitter and just sees this explosion of women being paid to play women of the night? Like am I the only one seeing this? Does the Daily Wire not see all of this corn and all of this degeneracy that is just popping up everywhere on the internet? All these women saying all this crazy degenerate type of stuff. Like I literally just made a video on some chicks that I found while doing research for another video, because, well, it was some, check it out if you got time. It was some chicks saying some crazy stuff, and like, I was doing research on, like modern dating and trying to look up studies and stuff, and while perusing through Twitter, I just happened across those clips, and those were just the craziest ones that I saw. Okay, I saw lots more that were not as crazy as those, but like, there's just an infinite supply of this craziness and this flood of people doing very not traditional things. And while I understand I'm countering his anecdotal evidence with my anecdotal evidence, I feel like most people have eyes. Most people, can take a good look around and see what's going on around them and understand what's going on around them. Like, I just generally have the impression that there's a lot more people that would perceive my perception of this as a bit more normal than Mr. Knowles' perception of this. But hey, that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think down in the comments down below? Make sure you leave a like on this video. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on Rumble as well.